This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk all about the long awaited console port finally coming to PC 14 years later, Nintendo announcing new hardware, Microsoft making moves with Halo, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 53. I'm your host, the man whose alarmo will assume he never sleeps given how often he rolls over at night, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who intends to delist every one of his videos from 2017 and remaster them for more views, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been it's been a very interesting week. In a lot of good ways, I will say. So, I guess the main thing that happened was Monday. My sister had her wedding ceremony. Even though she got married earlier this year, she actually had a full ceremony this past week. So that was nice. It was small, but it was still a very good get together. Definitely a good time, celebrating with family members and whatnot. So that was definitely good. And I spent the weekend with her the day before the wedding, so it just came together. Also, I was trying to surprise her. I made some ice cream, but I also made a batch for her as well. So brought that over, and she enjoyed that. But as far as like other stuff that has occurred, so I saw that there was a CPU on sale for cheap. So I went ahead and bought it. It came in today, so later on this weekend I'll go ahead and try to test it out on my PC and see if like the old CPU was the problem or if it is actually the motherboard. And depending on what happens there, I will follow up with that and see what happens there. I feel like there was like one more thing that was noteworthy. Let me just quickly confirm or deny. Yeah, no, that's actually been pretty much the main summary of my week.
All right, well, congratulations to your sister, even if it's technically just the official ceremony as opposed to actually being the beginning, but that's still very cool. Very cool. And I hope that's the thing with your CPU. I hope that works out. Which one did you get?
I got a Ryzen 5 5600X. I didn't want anything too fancy since the one I was using was just a 5 3600, and it's not like I'm really going to be doing. It's not like it's going to actually be a full gaming PC, so I didn't really need anything too powerful. Just something that was pre-budget.
Okay, cool. Well, my week has been largely uneventful. I really can't think of anything out of the ordinary that's gone on. It's pretty much all just the same normal stuff. Allergies are still kicking my butt. Maybe a little bit less than last week, but there will be lots of sniffling I'll have to edit out on the podcast because there's just not really anything I can do about it. So, it is what it is. So what have you been playing this past week?
So I have good news to report, and that is that I finally finished Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories. I did all of my grinding for both Riku and Sora. And I will say that after completing Riku's story and going back to Sora, just like the shift in the gameplay and also like certain speeds, just because Riku feels a whole lot faster than Sora.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while to readjust to that, but
yeah,
after grinding for a couple levels, then I got into a good swing of things. I was able to finish that out. But as far as with Riku and getting to the final boss of Ansem, I initially went in thinking this shouldn't be so bad. I'm fully maxed up at this point. The previous bosses that I encountered were not that difficult, all things considered. He wiped the floor with me the first time, and I thought, okay, maybe I just underestimated some things. Let me try it again. I went in, and he again took me out actually a whole lot faster than he did the first time, and I realized I'm really not properly. I probably should utilize using sleights more than I had originally intended to. I've been very conservative with using sleights, but I thought I probably should just go all out, and essentially I did. But one thing I will say that was interesting is the fact that if you fully max out Riku, it's very possible to get through the fight one way or another, whether you live or die, without actually exiting dark mode, because your dark meter is so high at that point that you can take so many hits and not get knocked out of dark mode, which is great because that is the thing that saves me. that will save you, just because Riku's more powerful in dark mode as opposed to his normal form, and the different sleights he also has are very useful. So that definitely helped out there. The third time I actually did get, and even in a very dramatic finish, so I thought that was pretty cool there. And then after playing Chain of Memories, I thought maybe I'll just get a little taste. I don't intend on playing it any more than probably like the first few hours, but let me get a taste of Kingdom Hearts 2. I did, and I completed Roxas' story. Then I started as Sora. Then I went, I completed, let's see, I did Hollow Bastion, I did Land of Dragons, and I finished the first run of Beast's Castle before going back to Hollow Bastion. So unfortunately, it seems like I've fell into a trap where I'm probably going to be playing this now. But part of the reason why I wanted to do it is because Kingdom Hearts 2 was a game that I never finished. I think I probably got up to the second time you go to Beast's Castle and you fight Zaldin. That's probably about as far as I can remember. But I do really appreciate the reaction or commands that are implemented in this game, because it definitely kicks things up a notch from Kingdom Hearts 1 and implements new ways of countering enemies and just, interacting with other things in battle, which is very interesting and also spices things up a bit. But yeah, I'll see how things go, if this is something I actually stick with or not. But the last thing I actually played was a game called Mandragora, and it's not out yet. I actually played the backer demo for the game, and there is a actual public demo that is available on Steam. This is, I mentioned this last week, it's I was wrong, it's not 2D, it's 2.5D, 2.5D Metroidvania Souls-like. So like if you know games like Salt and Sanctuary, oh gosh, I had another game that popped into my mind too that I guess Hollow Knight also counts as a Souls, 2D Souls-like, maybe Metroidvania, but games like those, it's something akin to that. Not bad so far from what I played. The only problem is after the first boss fight, the frame rate dropped dramatically, probably to around the 40s, which is really weird. Now, part of the reason I don't know if is because it's a Linux thing or not. That's something I haven't really experimented too much, if like using a different version of Proton would fix things or whatnot. So I'll definitely have to check that out later. I also haven't tested it out on the Steam Deck. Based upon my initial start with the game, I would say that it probably could run on the Steam Deck, because I was for a good period of time getting it to run at 60 FPS. I'll go back at some point and try playing it on the Steam Deck and see what it's like on there, and maybe also again try to experiment with the different versions of Proton and see if that has any sort of effects on the performance as well. But not too bad. The character feels a little bit slower than I would care for, but it's nothing that's too dramatic. It's not something that will, make or break the game, but it's just something that I wasn't really a fan of. There's definitely a whole lot of customization. I looked at the skill tree, And granted, each build you make, whether it's something like a fighter, I guess Inquisitor, which would count as sort of oh gosh, now I'm forgetting what. Essentially a red mage type, a battle mage type of class, and then there are other builds as well, but unfortunately those aren't available in the demo right now. But I think there are like 5 different classes or 5 build types you can select and choose from, but each one has its own skill tree, and it's definitely immense. Just looking at what was available at the time of playing, so I'll probably get back into that and try it some more. But so far, from what I've tried, it is pretty decent. But hopefully, with more work done, because the game is still, of course, still in development. But based on what I've played so far, the final product should be interesting.
All right. Well, I definitely will say, looking at the gameplay, it looks pretty cool. I didn't get a chance to really watch much of the stream you did of it, mostly just because it was something that I wanted to be able to pay close attention to, and unfortunately I just didn't really have a good gap of time when I could do that. But at least seeing the gameplay here that you sent me, it looks pretty cool. Definitely interested. Regarding Kingdom Hearts 2, though, yeah, Kingdom Hearts 2 is great. It's been probably... The last time I played all the way through that was probably 2006. So, 18 years ago. And Kingdom Hearts 2, at least so far, since I haven't played that much of Kingdom Hearts 3, 2 is still my favorite of all the Kingdom Hearts games. And it has some really, really cool battles in there, especially towards the end of the game. So I'm glad that you're getting a chance to do that. I think probably the thing I like the most is the different forms that you get with Sora. That was one of the things that I thought really just took it a huge step up. And also just the fact that you have a lot more like aerial combat in that versus what you had in the previous Kingdom Hearts games. So that just made it a lot better from my perspective. And I felt like Sephiroth was actually more beatable in that one versus Kingdom Hearts 1. Just because of the sheer variety you had with everything. But yeah, good stuff. As far as what I've been playing, first, of course, I do want to mention that I played some Lego games with the kids, of course. Still just working through Lego Harry Potter with my oldest, which we're on year 6. I think we're pretty close to the end. I can't remember exactly. I've only watched the movies all the way through one time, so I don't quite remember how far we are into it, but we're in year 6. And then my other son, we are... I think we're very close to the end of episode 3. We're getting pretty close, because we just finished doing Kashyyyk after Order 66 starts. So we should be pretty close to the end at this point. So there's that. And then as far as other stuff, well, Persona 5 Royal, I did play that on the Steam Deck so I could record the footage for that. Got that fully recorded, and man, it is really noticeable how much better it looks on the Steam Deck. I couldn't quite do a good job explaining what the major difference was in terms of visuals between the Switch and the Steam version. It's really just the detail of the character models. Like on the Switch, the character models are very blurry and they don't have a lot of detail to them, which makes sense. I mean, you have limited power with the Switch. It's limited in terms of rendering. Obviously, it's only 30 frames per second on Switch, but on Steam Deck, it's solid 60 the whole time. Never changes on max settings at 800p, and I mean, it looks fantastic and runs superbly. Like, I almost wanted to keep playing just because it's like, man, I mean, this is a great game, super stylish, the music's great, everything about it is great, and runs like a dream on Steam Deck. I think it gets around 4.5 hours of battery life, something like that. give or take. It might be more. I didn't check exactly what it said at the beginning. I just know that after playing for about 2 hours, I think I had like 40% of the battery left. So it was still pretty good. So then the other game that I've been playing most obviously is God of War Ragnarok. And so I played a lot this past week. I mean, it was the only thing I was playing, and pretty much anytime I got a spare moment, I was playing it, whether I was doing it on the Steam Deck or when I, had the ability, I'd be playing on my PC. And first, I do want to note, as of yesterday, I beat the campaign, so that's the majority of the game. I did all but maybe a few like collectibles before, or at least all but a few collectibles that I had to get. So with all the side content, I did just about all of the stuff that I could do before finishing the campaign, because there's some things that don't unlock until after you finish the story. The optional bosses that I talked about previously, the Berserkers. So I beat all of them except for the last 2 before I finished the story, because one of them does not unlock until you finish the story. Rather, you can't access the location where that one becomes available. And then the king doesn't show up until after you've beaten all the rest of them. So I fought I finished the game, the campaign on Wednesday, or not Wednesday, Monday. Yeah, on Monday. And then Tuesday, maybe I'm wrong. No, I think I might have actually finished. I think I finished the campaign on Tuesday, and then I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is that I finished the campaign. I beat the second to last Berserker. That is the one that comes right before the king, and then I fought the king today and beat him. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Berserkers, because these were some interesting challenges. So, of course, I shared a bunch about the ones yesterday. In the case of the other ones that I fought since then, so there is a set of 3 of them that you can fight, which I didn't know until I came to that encounter, that there would be 3 of them all at once. It gets pretty hectic. Now, the one thing is that, what's nice is that 2 of them, they share a health pool. So if you attack one, it damages both of them at the same time. But you still have 3 of them attacking you all at once. And it can be really difficult, especially with the camera angle and everything, to keep track of all of them. So I fought this trio over and over and over. I was about a level underneath them. And I thought, okay, I could do this. I kept trying. There'd be times I'd get close. I'd, manage to take down one of them, or the pair of 2. And then I would die. And it just I can't even tell you how many times I attempted this. It was ridiculous how many times I attempted this, being one level lower than them. And the levels are entirely based on your gear. So your armor and your weapons. And I was level 6, they're level 7. So then I attempt this fight many times. I finally decided to take a break from fighting the Berserkers for a bit. And in doing so, I went off and did some additional side stuff, did some additional story stuff, took care of some of the trials that I needed to take care of, just getting side stuff done in general so I could get my weapons leveled up. So I got 2 out of 3 of my weapons leveled up. And because the third one, you have to actually beat the Berserker trio in order to get your weapons leveled up. Or to get your last weapon to max level. So when I went into the fight this time, I was level 8 for my gear instead of level 6, which is what I was previously. So I went into this fight. Now, I will say I did fail the first time I went back in at this, but just barely. Literally, I was just wiping the floor with them. And then I got down to the boss had a single sliver of health left, and I died. And there are resurrection stones in this game, so you get one resurrection stone that you can have at any given time. And so I got revived pretty late in the fight. Unfortunately, I didn't quite take out the boss, and so they just had that sliver of health. It would have been like 1, maybe 2 hits at the most it would have taken to take them out. But I died. So I went back in the second time, fight went faster, and I cleared it without dying at all. And it's just like massive difference. And the gameplay footage that's being shown here is as long as it didn't like glitch out on the Streamlabs side of things, because earlier it seemed like it was playing the wrong clip, then it will be the fight with just the winning version of this battle. But before, they were a level above me, and it was just a little bit too much. Did some slightly different things with my gear and everything this when I went back to it. Plus, of course, being having higher level gear, and it was just so much easier, and definitely taught me that when it comes to these fights, it does not hurt to wait. Instead of being so prideful that you waste a bunch of time fighting an enemy over and over, hoping to beat them, especially when you're like me and you're not very skilled at the game, it's better to just level up your gear and come back later. So, yeah, this fight is just it's definitely one of those very tricky fights, but I was able to take out the twins that that share the health pool first, and then I took out the main boss of the 3. So it's kind of interesting though, because when I had originally beat my head against a wall repeatedly trying to complete this fight at a lower level, I had talked to some guys in the Married to Games Discord, and they were telling me this was the hardest fight in the game as far as they were concerned. And so I figured, okay, that's probably what it's going to be. It's going to be the hardest fight. That's what it's been for me so far. Because really, the only thing that made this as difficult as it was just the fact that there was 3 of them, even if 2 of them shared a health pool. But like, I had fewer issues with this fight than I did with the with what you call it, or rather, let me rephrase that. I had more issues with this fight than I did with the group of 2 of them that was technically supposed to be harder because they were higher level. And the team of 2 of them, it was just easier because there was only 2 of them. And that one, the only reason why it took me as long as it did was mostly because one of the 2 enemies uses this unblockable attack that you can, if you can get close enough to him, you can use an attack that you use this shield thing that like breaks the attack that stops them from using it. But if he uses it and you're too far away to get to him to stop him from using it, then he just completely wipes. I mean, it does a ton of damage. And so that's the only reason I had so much trouble with that particular fight. I mean, that one I was able to beat before I got this one done. But yeah, this one just ended up being an interesting challenge. Either way, yeah, it was very memorable, and definitely one that I know now. If I eventually go back and do New Game Plus, I will make sure that I come back at the right time. I don't think that they would be necessarily any higher level than normal. I think they just have more health. So theoretically, it shouldn't be as hard. And, at that point, I should easily be able to... I mean, not only will I be probably level 9 gear, I might even have level 10 gear, depending on what I get from Valhalla. So, I mean, the Valhalla stuff is completely separate. It's its own separate, like, roguelike mode. But you can carry over stuff that you obtain in Valhalla to play, to use in the main game. Like, one of the things that's cool is that you can, for your rage attack, which is like where he like gets super mad and super strong and just like charges an enemy. It's, you press R and F, or the right stick and left stick and all that. It switches so that he uses the Blade of Zeus, which is, since the original games were in Greek mythology, it's supposed to be like super duper powerful, but of course you can't use it all the time. You can only use it when you have your rage meter full. But anyway, I haven't looked super hard into everything with Valhalla, so I basically just have essentially the gist of how it works, and I'm definitely planning to do it after I am completely done with this game. So that being said, I am going to talk a bit about the last Berserker fight. Now, the second to last one, which I mentioned earlier, that one I think I recorded, but I didn't include in the gameplay here. Mostly just because it was not a particularly difficult fight. It only took me a few tries to get through it. Partially because, number one, even though it was one of the 2 post-game Berserker fights, it was also a single enemy, and it basically was just using a lot of the same attacks that all the previous Berserkers had. Like, they kind of build on each other, like in terms of the types of attacks they have. Like, you'll have the first enemy that has all the specific attacks, and then you'll have another enemy that has like a different element of those same attacks, and then as you get further along, they'll start you'll see repeated types of attacks, but of course they'll be stronger and have more health and everything. So anyway, so that one, all I'm going to say is that it wasn't particularly hard. Only took me a few tries to beat. But the King was where it was one of the more interesting ones. Now this one definitely was nowhere near as many tries as the trio. Definitely nowhere near that much. I think I attempted it. I tried twice during lunch today, and I got decently far. I got him down like 3/4 of the way, but there's like one particular attack that he uses that really all the Berserkers, I mean, most of the Berserkers have used. I've never been good at avoiding it, but because of the fact that he would use it often enough to where I would just get hit by it and it would keep damaging me, it was the one major thing that kept me from being able to successfully dodge it or parry it. Basically, it's just the area of effect for the attack that he uses. It's like an elemental explosion in front of him, and it like covers his entire front area, so it like goes off to his sides and entirely in front of him. So the only way to avoid it is either if you dodge backwards, far enough backwards to where it can't hit you, or if you can get around behind him. And the only way to really get around behind him is either if you have time slowed to where you can actually move all the way around him, or if you just happen to already be far enough away. So really the best bet is either if you can dodge backwards, or learn how to parry it. I had difficulty figuring out the parry timing. I just hadn't figured it out yet. And so I ended up just looking up, okay, how do I parry all this guy's attacks? Because I knew that this was not exclusive to him. I'd seen this particular attack many times with the other Berserkers. It just never hit quite as hard, and of course none of them had as much health as he does. So it definitely made it more challenging. And so I found out how to do it, and I would say I still can't perfectly parry that type of attack, but I was able to parry it more often than not, which was exceedingly helpful, as well as making a couple other changes to my gear and my runic attacks and that sort of thing. So let's see here. I did twice during lunch today. Then I attempted a couple times on Steam Deck, just kind of testing out some new things with the build, thinking, well, it's not impossible that I could beat him here, even though it was highly unlikely because of the reduced frame rate, which meant less responsiveness and the controls and everything else. But it ended up, let me back up. After attempting a few times on Steam Deck and not having any success, I just said, okay, I'm just going to stop. I'm done with my break. I will come back to this, try again after work. So I went back in after work, and the first time I attempted with being able to properly parry that attack, or at least more often than not, I beat him. And I will say that compared with what's her face? Sigrun, who's the Valkyrie Queen in God of War 2018. This guy was not that difficult. Now, I think I would probably be able to do a lot better on Sigrun now, especially now that I actually use my shield to block and not just try to parry. But even that being said, he was hard, but the hardest thing about him was really more than anything, apart from, having to learn how to parry that elemental explosion, the hardest thing about fighting this guy was just the amount of health he had. And the fact is, even with being... Actually, I'm not even sure if my character's at level 8 or level 9. If he was at level 9, I probably would have had an easier time. If my character's at level 9, I think my character's still just around level 8, even with all my weapons maxed out. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I might be level 9. Anyway, point is that he was tough, but nowhere near as tough as some of the other tough bosses I fought, and I did not have as much difficulty with him as I had with many of the other Berserkers, mostly because I had learned the patterns well enough, and it's like he doesn't really do anything new that the other Berserkers don't do, so it was just easier. It was easier in general being able to know how to avoid a lot of his attacks and at least some of the time parry them, even though I definitely didn't do as well as people who are actually good at the game. But either way, it was a good fight. I'm glad I was able to beat him, get my achievement for that. And at this point, the only thing I have left for achievements is I have one boss, which is the Valkyrie Queen, the new Valkyrie Queen, which I've heard is the hardest fight in the game, but I'll see how it ends up being. Like, I've heard kind of mixed things. Some people have said that it's harder than the Valkyrie Queen in 2018. Others have said it's easier than the Valkyrie Queen in 2018. And the only way I'll find out is to attempt it for myself and see what happens. But I just know that it's going to be satisfying when I'm able to do it one way or another. And I don't mind if it takes me a bunch of tries, because I would be extremely shocked if I was able to do it in anything less than, 10 tries. I think realistically, if I had fought the Berserker King in a different circumstance, like specifically if I had not fought him on the Steam Deck and had just done the 2 attempts during lunch and then looked up the parry strategy, I potentially could have beaten him in 3 tries. And yeah, I don't know. It was a satisfying fight, though. I mean, I'm glad I got through it. All that build up. Oh, and it looks like my character level is level 8, like at the very top of level 8. And I think it was that I probably didn't. Something wasn't. Oh yeah, that's right. I think one of the gear pieces for my shield was not fully upgraded because I didn't have the materials I needed. So that would be why. Yep. So I was a lower level than him. If I was level 9, I probably could have done a lot more damage at a time. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as that goes. I mean, that's the only other game I played, and I have 4 or 5 achievements left. Let me look at Steam. I think it's just 4 is what I have left, because the last achievement that I get is just for getting all the other achievements. So, and then the rest of the achievements that are on the game are specifically for Valhalla. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say on that front.
Okay, and just for clarification, Valhalla mode is the free sort of expansion that was added. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And you said it's like a roguelike, sort of like a roguelike. So is it like have a definitive ending, or is it just like endless mode?
No, it has a definitive ending. I think it takes more after Hades than other roguelikes, and it has an actual story to it. I think the main focus, and this doesn't spoil anything, is just mostly Kratos kind of like overcoming his past demons regarding, the man he was in, when he was in Greece, or yeah, going through all the Greek mythology stuff and killing all of those gods and everything else, and one of those gods being his father, as well as just a bunch of other things like that. Looking at who he was compared to who he has been, because it's been thousands of years for him, and just looking back at that, and he's struggled with it for many years, and he's learned to accept a lot of it and be able to move on, especially with having remarried and had a son, and now his son is in his teens, and he's had a chance to bond with his son during the last game and help him grow into a man who's able to take care of himself and everything else, and so all that good stuff.
Okay. And I know you mentioned the Berserker King being easier than you remember than the Valkyrie Queen. Would you say overall, though, the Berserkers were easier than the Valkyries, or would you say...
I'd say it's pretty similar. Without going back and fighting the Valkyries again, it would be hard to say with certainty whether any of them would... whether I would consider them on equal footing, because I feel like the Valkyries were such a memorable thing because of how much more difficult they were than all the other enemies in the game. And with the Berserkers, yes, they're way more difficult than the majority of the enemies in the game. In fact, I don't think, there's not a single story boss that even comes close to comparing to the Berserkers in this game. But I also feel like as I got further along with the Berserkers, with most of their mechanics being similar enough to where I learned how to avoid certain attacks, that definitely made them feel like they were less challenging in a sense. I mean, like I said, without going back and facing the Valkyries of 2018, it's really hard for me to say with any certainty which one's harder. And of course, if I did go back and face the Valkyries, I would be doing it in New Game Plus, because I have no reason to restart from scratch when I have the New Game Plus option. It's like, why would I do that? That's stupid. It's pointless. But yeah. The only thing I just want to say real quick, the only thing that I do want to say that is an annoyance, and I think that Study Santa Monica is looking into it, is that for some reason the trophies do not pop on the PlayStation side unless you are playing on PC and not on Steam Deck. If you play on Steam Deck, anything you earn on Steam Deck, the corresponding trophy does not pop at all, even when you connect on PC. And I mean, I think it's just a bug. I know it wasn't intentional, because they thought that they had fixed it, but it seems like the issue is still present, because I got probably about half of the trophies that I have on Steam Deck, and I checked earlier today and they still hadn't popped on PlayStation. So I could technically have the Platinum Trophy without actually having the rest of the trophies because of this bug.
Well, is it really a bug, though? Because I thought that it just wasn't going to work at all because the trophy system required Windows.
Well, no. I mean, what I'm saying is that I think that the way it's supposed to be is that the trophies can still pop. It's just that you can't. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to make it Steam Deck compatible if they make it impossible to earn the trophies separately. Now, if I wasn't able to connect on PC, then yeah, I could totally understand from that standpoint. But the fact that I can connect my save on PC, it seems like the trophy should pop, even if it's like, oh, okay, I popped this trophy and then this, these previous trophies pop now because a new trophy popped. But yeah, if not, then I guess it'll be that I will probably have the Platinum Trophy and still be missing a bunch of the earlier trophies because of this. Which is like, that doesn't make any sense, but it's like, well, you can look at my Steam achievements. You see that I earned all these trophies. It's like, I did the work. I beat all these bosses and went through all these challenges. Right now, the only thing I have left, I have One achievement that's tied to, well, actually two achievements that are specifically tied to beating the Valkyrie Queen, because one of them is beating the Queen herself, and the other being a certain item drop that only comes after you beat her. That helps complete a trophy that's collecting all of like these sword hilts and relics that you get in the game. And then the other is finding the remaining artifacts, which there's just a handful that I'm missing. And then, what's here? Valkyrie Queen, relics, artifacts. There's one other one that I can't remember off the top of my head. Because I know that there's 4 of them. 4 of them I have left. Plus, I mean, then I get the platinum when I get those 4. So anyway, it doesn't really matter. Oh, it's some side quest where I need to like find a different flower from every realm, and I don't know what it ultimately nets me in terms of rewards, but it's a side quest. So I think it brings more story stuff. So yeah, that's that.
Okay, nice. Yeah, definitely glad that you enjoyed your playthrough of this, got through all of the berserkers. Hopefully the new Valkyrie Queen won't give you too much of a hard time, but hey, I know that you should be close if you're not already on the threshold of fully maxing out your levels, so hopefully that will make things easier in that regard then.
Yeah, I'll have to look into see what I need or where I can get those specific materials I need in order to max out my level, because I think that it might just be one of the side quests that opened up after I finished the campaign that I need in order to do it, and I've only done like one of the 10 things. It's just like this particular group of enemies that popped up in 10 different places in the different realms. So yeah, one thing I will say, just one last thing, at least I think it's one last thing. I'm not going to say what exactly happened in the story, but there was 2 big story things that happened that unfortunately I had spoiled for me by YouTube. And I mean, it's like I didn't know what one of them. I was like, okay, I don't know how this happens exactly, but now I know that it happens. And then the other thing was like, oh, okay, and it's just titles of YouTube videos, and it's like I didn't want to see this yet. I wanted to find out for myself. It's cooler when you find out these twists. And the fact of the matter is, the writing in this game is great. Like, it is legitimately great. And I know that there's the haters about Sweet Baby, and it's like, well, okay, I'm a hater of Sweet Baby too, but people blowing out of proportion that you happen to have a couple black characters in Norse mythology. Yes, it doesn't make sense. Yes, it's tokenism, and I don't like tokenism any more than anyone else. But to completely dismiss the game because of the tokenism, I think that's stupid. And it's fine if you don't like the gameplay. By all means, you don't have to play it. Nobody's required to play it. I'm not even going to say, oh, you're a bad person, or you're a racist because you don't play this game because of these 2 black characters. It's like, I guess technically there's 3 black characters, at least that you see on screen. Point being, like, I think that there are legitimate criticisms of the game, but I personally loved the game. I thought the story was expertly written. It was extremely well done. The performances were excellent. The voice acting was excellent. Just, while I can definitely understand also some of like the sections where you play as Atreus, for example, aren't as good as the parts where you're playing as Kratos. It's nowhere near like the level of the Mary Jane and Miles sections in Spider-Man, where it was just like, oh, this is so slow. I hate doing this, and it's terrible. Of course, saying when you play as Miles and Miles Morales, it's a whole different story because it's fantastic. But no, I mean, like this one, yes, you don't have as much action, but he still has his own combat, and he feels pretty good in combat. There's not a whole lot of sections like this. All of them are pretty brief, but it was essential to tell the story because of the direction that the story took, and I felt like it was important. And they also set up like the potential, well, not just the potential, but the likelihood of where the next game would be set. Because the Norse saga is done. Ragnarok was the end of the Norse saga. And I thought it was really well set up, and it was a good evolution of Kratos' character. Not to where it felt like they were just erasing what happened to previously, more like that they were simply taking the realities of what he did and everything. And it's not like he's like, oh, I was toxically masculine for doing these things, or, you know, some other stupidity like that. It's more like he recognized that the revenge and everything that he went through, it didn't bring him the peace he was looking for. It didn't get rid of the nightmares and everything else that he had to deal with as a result of being tricked into killing his wife and daughter, you know, back in the very first game. And just him being able to he left his homeland to come to this area to try to get away from his past, and he's ultimately come to a point where he realized he can't escape his past. It will always be with him, and he has to move on. And he didn't want his son to be like him. And not spoiling anything whatsoever, but, you know, he didn't want his son to make the same mistakes that he did. And as a father, I 100% understand that and identify with it. And that's one of the reasons why that first game I identified so heavily with. Now, it wasn't the reason I loved the game. I loved that about the game, but I loved the game because it is a 3D Metroidvania, and the combat is fantastic. It didn't have any of the stuff in that the previous God of War games had, like in terms of the nudity and all that other stuff that I wanted to stay away from. And it was just like, I like that, even though it's definitely in many ways slower pace, because it's not as much of a combo heavy thing, even though there's definitely lots of combos in the game and you can do a lot with it. It's different from the old games in terms of how it plays. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Not saying that people who feel that way are wrong, because I don't think they're wrong. I just don't agree with them. It's like, you know, I loved it. I loved 2018. I loved Ragnarok. I am happily going to get the platinum on it. Assuming Valhalla doesn't give me any major frustrations with it, I don't expect it to be too bad. That I'm planning to get all the achievements in that as well. And I'm super glad that I finally got around to finishing this game. So I still think it's stupid that PSN is required for it, and that they're not selling it in 100 and whatever countries. That's stupid, but I enjoyed the game. I am so glad that I finally got a chance to play all the way through it. And even though the Steam Deck performance leaves a lot to be desired, it was still technically playable on the Steam Deck, and on the PC itself, the performance and the visuals are just glorious. So good. So, yeah. I've talked a lot about this. I'll definitely include this segment because it's, you know, more or less the end of my journey with Ragnarok. I would say probably by the time next week rolls around, well, I'll definitely be done with all of the base game stuff, and I'll probably be in Valhalla. And when I'm done with Valhalla, I haven't fully decided what I'm doing yet. So I'm kind of floating between a few different things. Of course, there's going back to Elden Ring, which I may decide to do. I'm kind of thinking about going back to the old God of War games because I've never played all the way through them. The main thing I have to ask myself is, do I want to go back to the Vita version, where it's definitely lower frame rate and lower performance and lesser visuals, just because I haven't played my Vita as much lately and I kind of just want to play it? Or should I just play it on the Steam Deck where I have the PS3 version emulated at 60 frames per second? Because it's like, oh, that's kind of a hard choice. It's like, it shouldn't be a hard choice. It should be an obvious choice. But I think it's also because of the fact that I bought the Vita version and I feel like I should play it. So, rather than just emulating it. But like I'm going between that and potentially going back to Starfield. partially just because of the fact that Starfield, well, for one, it's much less difficult in terms of its challenge. So it'd be kind of like a nice change of pace, but also because I've been kind of wanting to go back to Starfield, and then of course also like I had my music playing the other day, which I very rarely listen to music anymore on its own, but then one of the songs from Starfield came up. I'm like, man, I haven't played Starfield in quite a while. Maybe I'll jump back into that. But then also, there's this little game called Zelda Ocarina of Time. Have you ever heard of it? My son started playing it a little bit on his 2DS. I mean, and he kind of got stuck a little bit, and then he was more interested in playing Yoshi's New Island because he realized that this game exists on 2DS, and I previously hadn't gotten it for him because it's just not as good. Like, Yoshi's Island is great. Yoshi's Woolly World is fantastic, and when I initially got the boys their 2DSs, I got them Yoshi's Woolly World, because especially my oldest, super into Yoshi. He absolutely loves Yoshi. Now his horizons have expanded quite a bit. He plays a lot of different games, but since I do own Yoshi's New Island, I was like, well, it's fine. My kids, their 2DSs are modded anyway, so I'll download him Yoshi's New Island so he can play that. And he's just more interested in that, partially I think because although he was liking Zelda at first, he was getting stuck, and he is stubborn about asking for help, even though it's like, I know this game backwards and forwards. Like, I'm not like speedrunner knowledge worth, but I know how to get around, and if I don't remember exactly, I can figure it out pretty quickly because I played through it a bunch of times. But yeah, it's like, it kind of gave me the itch. I'm like, I haven't played through Ocarina of Time in honestly, it's probably the last time was when it first came out on 3DS. I played through the base version, and then Master Quest right after that. And so I'm kind of considering it. But then I also, if I could figure out how to get the PC port working, I'd kind of like to play the PC version, because it's like, then I get the 60 frames, or actually probably 90 frames per second on the Steam Deck, and more nostalgia. I mean, like, I think the 3DS version is technically better, and it looks better and everything else, but in terms of frame rate, there's that big difference there. And I've never played the game at anything above, I think it was just 30 on the 3DS, whereas, it was 15 on the N64. Or whatever it was, 15 or 20. But yeah, so I'm going back and forth on what I'm going to do next. That really is just going to depend on how I feel when I finish Valhalla. Whether I feel like I want to play more God of War and maybe try to dive into those older games, or if I want to just move on to something different. And I do own all the old God of War games, because I got the PS3 collection a while back that came with all of the old games. So I have all of those. But anyway, I've been talking a bunch. You got anything else?
No, sir.
All right, well, let's get into the news. So first up, as mentioned in the intro, Red Dead Redemption is finally officially confirmed coming to PC October 29th. In terms of specs, on the low end, it's pretty low specs as expected. On the high end, most of the specs are pretty reasonable. I mean, the RAM, you only need 8 gigs of RAM, which, I mean, is definitely more than what it had in the PS3 and 360, but still is like very, very low in terms of what you need. And then the graphics card for recommended is an RTX 2070. Not even a 2070 Super, just a 2070. Now, it doesn't say what the recommended specs will give you, but my guess is that's probably 4K 60. At least potentially, because it shouldn't be that demanding of a game, but it's hard to say with any certainty until we get kind of more information. Either way, what are your thoughts?
Oh man, it's definitely one of those finally moments. This is something that we've talked about before, something that we've wanted brought over to PC. Why it hasn't happened before is beyond both of us. But, it's been over a decade since the game released and no PC port whatsoever. And we got the sequel of all things before we got the first game.
Right.
But finally getting it is great. As you mentioned, the system requirements aren't... They're not... They're pretty fair, I would say. I also wonder, though, what the quality of the port is going to be like. As far as will it be a decent port, or will there be some sort of issues? I would assume no. I would assume that this would be a pretty good quality port, but I'm not certain because I don't know about has Rockstar ever had a game that was originally just on console before being ported to PC?
All of them.
At some point, or were they? No?
All of them were originally on console before being ported to PC.
Wow. Yep. Okay then. Okay then. So never mind then. I was gonna say then I don't know how this would turn out, but
this is the first time it's ever been this large of a gap, but it's not the first time.
Yeah.
In general.
But I'll still say I'm optimistic about getting a pretty decent port. That thing should run pretty smoothly. The only thing though, for me personally, just because I feel like I cannot give in and abandon anything and be hypocritical in the sense is I can't get the game just because it requires Rockstar Online to be connected an account. So that's the only reason I will not be getting the game. I thought that it didn't for some reason, but then I saw that it does require an account, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to pass, unfortunately. But I am happy that's finally coming over.
If I made you an account under the Orange Box email, would you do it? Because you wouldn't have to do it. It would just be me doing it, and go ahead.
It's tempting, but I just feel like I can't necessarily... I don't know. I just feel like for some reason, it would be me giving a pass because of the requirement there. And it's not necessarily something we're akin to, say, I despise what, say, Square Enix does, and so I don't necessarily want to support their games, but I buy, a key from a third-party site and something like that, where I feel like, okay, I'm buying the game, but I'm not directly giving them money, as opposed to buying the game and still directly supporting the account requirement. So I guess that's the reasoning for me behind that.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that the account requirement is not intrusive. At least it wasn't with Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, granted, I had created a Rockstar account because initially when I bought Red Dead 2, I bought a Rockstar key for it. So I had to create an account. Actually, well, I can't remember. I think I had a Rockstar account going all the way back to Grand Theft Auto 4 because that was one of the first PC games I ever got. Well, that is when I started doing more heavily gaming on PC and I got my gaming laptop and everything. So I still had an account from way back then. But when I played Red Dead 2, I played that almost entirely on Steam Deck. And the account thing was not in any way, shape, or form detrimental to the game. I still got performance I was very happy with. And, the fact that it was easily staying around 40 frames per second. And that was with very few dips. It wasn't like, God of War Ragnarok which is actually kind of crazy when you think about it, because God of War Ragnarok, yes, it's technically a little bit better looking in some ways, but God of War Ragnarok is not an open world game, even though there are some open-ish sections. Red Dead 2 is an open world game, and it performs great on the Steam Deck, or at least as far as I'm concerned, because 40 is perfectly fine. I don't think the most it ever dipped down was maybe down to 35 to 38, but that was Red Dead 2. Red Dead 1 should easily be able to maintain 60 frames per second on the Steam Deck as long as it's well optimized. And based on Rockstar's history, I trust that they're going to have a good port here. I mean, if they could do locked 30 frames per second on the Switch, there's absolutely no reason that they can't get 60 or above on the Steam Deck. And it is a fantastic game, and I do want you to play it. I want you to play it now. I'm not buying it for you, because right now I'm not even buying myself a copy because I just can't afford it right now. But, man, and I actually do want to get it because, well, for one, I'd love to do the comparison. Steam Deck versus Switch on that, because it looks great on the Switch. And for a Switch port, I mean, you know, it actually runs better on the Switch than it does on the PS3. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, I would love to do the comparison for it, but it's just going to have to wait, because right now I can't really afford to buy any games. I'm basically just not buying any games for a while. I mean, it's not really a problem. It's not like I have a shortage of games to play. I have so many games, and I'm like, I mean, God of War Ragnarok, the only reason why I got it, I did, was because I pre-ordered it months ago. And, yeah, but yeah, I'm excited that this is happening. I do want to note a couple things that have been shown as far as the type of additional features that the PC version has for Red Dead Redemption. Of course, it has FSR 3 and DLSS 3 both available for upscaling if you so desire to use that. It didn't say if there's frame generation, but I would guess with FSR 3 that probably is. And even if there's not, you know, for some people it would just be helpful to get a little better performance if you need it. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
Not for a game this old. It has 4K support for up to 144 hertz, which is great. I bet a lot of computers could probably do this pretty easily, just based on how old this game is. Has ultra-wide support now, as well as super ultra-wide. So instead of just 21:9, it's 32:9, which is insane. I'm pretty sure Red Dead 2 has that as well, but still, that's insane. You can adjust the draw distance, shadows, and more. So it's like, this is going to be... I think this is going to be a really great port, and I can't wait to check it out. I just wish I didn't have to wait. I mean, well, not that I really have time to play it right now anyway, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, this is a game I've wanted on PC for a really long time. And finally being able to get a version of Red Dead Redemption that is above 30 frames per second. That's actually 60 frames per second or more. And you can adjust the settings so you can make it look even better. Or if you need to, you can turn down things if your computer's not super strong. And you can play it on the go at above 30 frames per second. I mean, being able to play it on the go on the Switch was already great, but being able to play it on the go above 30 frames per second is fantastic. So I'm very excited about this. I just wish I didn't. I wish I could actually buy it right now. I mean, there are other things that I would probably buy first anyway, even though this one would be a great one for comparison. But either way, it's good stuff. I hope you will reconsider playing this, and there may very well be some way to get around that requirement. Because you could play Red Dead 2 offline on the Steam Deck plenty. I played it almost exclusively offline, at least when I wasn't at home. So
Now, actually, there is actually one thing that I just thought about, and I noticed that I was just checking out to see. I didn't see it on the page, so I was wondering, what do you think the actual price will be? Because it's
going to be 60. I think it's going to be 60.
It's going to be 60.
I think so. I'm pretty sure that's what it was when it came out on the Switch and the PS4.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's going to be pricey, but it is a great game. And of course, it's going to have all the additional features. I mean, do I think they should be charging? No, they shouldn't be charging 60. I think really they should be charging like 40. I think would be reasonable. But it is going to be the best version of the game, without question. and it'll be playable both on PC and Steam Deck and other PC handhelds. So, and without having to emulate it, because the emulation, I don't care what people say, the emulation of it is bad. Well, except for the Switch emulation. The Switch emulation is supposed to be really good, and that makes up for the other ones. But it's like you try to do the PS3 emulation, it's absolute garbage. The 360 is better, but it's still not very good. And I mean, you emulate the Switch version, that's the best way to emulate. But in terms of, emulating the Switch version versus getting the PC version, I mean, really, the only thing is obviously whether or not you want to pay for it, and I pay for my games, so it's just like I mean, people who want to pirate, they're going to pirate anyway, so it's not really going to make any difference from that standpoint, but whatever. So either way, I hope you will give this game a chance eventually. Maybe well, I was going to say maybe they'll put it up on GOG, but probably not, because I don't think Red Dead 2 is on GOG. So most likely you won't ever have that option. But it might be you can create a Rockstar account and then never play online when you're playing, just to spite them, just to send a message. Say, I'm not even going to connect to Red Dead Online. I'm just going to play without that. Because you can. So. Anyway. Alright, cool. You want to talk about this whole drama situation between Epic and Google and the current status of that?
Oh boy. Oh yes, sir. All right, so Epic Games is back once again with their lawsuits. They in the past they've sued Google, they've sued Apple, but now there's a new lawsuit against both Google and Samsung, and this is for an accusation of illegally working together to block competition on the app stores. And so here's essentially what Epic is saying on their page, saying that we are filing a court case against Google and Samsung over coordinated efforts to block competition in app distribution on Samsung devices with Samsung's default auto blocker feature. Auto blocker is the latest in a long series of dealings in which Google and Samsung have agreed not to compete to protect Google's monopoly power. Autoblocker cements the Google Play Store as the only viable way to get apps on Samsung devices, blocking every other store from competing on a level playing field. And then it's essentially just a whole lot of stuff that they're talking about here, and just a sort of a formal letter. Here's what they're saying. What Epic wants. We are asking the court to prohibit Samsung's and Google's anti-competitive and unfair conduct and mandate that Samsung eliminate the auto blocker by default and enable competition. The jury's decision was unanimous and clear. Google's agreements with OEMs to block competition are illegal. This applies not only to Google, but to the device manufacturers that collude with them. We will take all necessary steps to ensure this decision is fully upheld. And so there's that. And I believe this is a follow-up to that case, because recently, sometime after that, Google was ordered to open its Android App Store to competitors, and it will have to allow it'll essentially allow several different things. One thing is that Google will not be allowed to pay developers to launch apps first or exclusively through the Play Store. It will be barred from offering manufacturers or carriers incentives to pre-install Google Play or to not pre-install rival stores on new devices. The company won't be able to force app makers to use Google Play billing. It may not require a developer to set a price based on whether Google Play is used, and Google won't be able to restrict developers from pointing users to external payment options outside of the Play Store. And this mandate goes into effect starting November 1st of 2024. And it's for a 3-year period in the US. So there's that. I have several different things sort of juggling back and forth, I will say, but I'll let you go ahead and get this started.
All right. Well, as usual, Tim Sweeney's being a big fat crybaby. And that is me saying this as a fat guy. No, I mean, he's obviously not actually fat, but seriously, this is like, he's basically saying, Google, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you make it impossible for people to not impossible. How dare you make it more difficult for people to be able to download our app without having security features to keep it from happening? I mean, it's like literally, it's a security feature, because if people go onto the website and they just automatically download something, it's like auto blocking that thing is for the customer's protection, to keep their phone from getting hacked, from people downloading malicious applications, all that sort of stuff. They put that on by default because they know that some people are completely undiscerning. In fact, a lot of people are completely undiscerning. They'll just download whatever they want, and there's a whole lot of issues that can come with that. People can very easily have their phones hacked. They could have all of their data stolen. I mean, there's just like a whole can of worms that could happen if they didn't have that present. They have to have that feature present. And I'm pretty sure that Apple probably does something similar, would be my guess, because I can't imagine. I mean, like for all the things I have negative to say about Apple, security is not one of them. I think that their security is great. Other than the fact that sometimes they can make it a real pain in the butt to be able to unlock devices that were owned by a deceased family member. As I've experienced, you have to have a court order in order to be able to access that information. It's like, okay, you're protecting the data. That's great. It's really irritating, though, for family members who are trying to get onto their parents' old devices or, what have you. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. With this whole thing with Epic, though, it's like, okay, Google and Samsung do have these security settings set up by default in order to help protect customers, help protect their data, all of that. And Epic doesn't like that, because that makes it so that people have a more difficult time being able to get their app store so that they can download Fortnite and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is that this is actually something that's pretty easy to turn off, because it's on by default, but it's not difficult to turn off if people want to be able to download the Epic Games Store, which is garbage, or any other number of additional stores. Now, where I will say that I agree, well, I should say, I don't agree with Epic on this front, but I do think that the idea of Google being ordered to allow additional store platforms to be downloadable through Google Play, I think that's reasonable. I think that's something that they should do, because that would help to deal with these security issues. That way it gives people a way to get these alternate storefronts. However, I also understand at the same time the reason why they wouldn't want to do it, because of competition. Now, I think that Google needs to have competition, because for all the great things about Google, they're also one of the worst corporations, companies, whatever. I don't even know what you would call them. They're just so unbelievably massive in terms of free speech and censorship and everything else. And it's just like, it's insane what they do. But I mean, the reality is that even if they start doing like the Epic Games Store that you can get through Google Play, so that people can do their alternate payment methods and give their information to Chinese hackers, which is essentially what they're doing by getting the Epic Games Store, or rather just giving it to the CCP, I guess I should say, is more accurate. Giving their information to the CCP. The reality is that if the product is good enough, people will download it. As long as Google does their due diligence and makes sure that they're not allowing things to be on their store that are malicious, as much as I could easily argue that the Epic Games Store is malicious, then it should be fine. So, I mean, Google, of course, is appealing this decision, for the 3-year period that would begin on November 1st of this year. Some of the other things, like basically making it so Google can't make stuff exclusive to their store, I think that's also good. That they would be ordered to do that. I think Google needs to not be a monopoly so much, because they pretty much are for the most part. I don't think it's necessarily a problem from the standpoint of making it like the default store on Android and everything else. I mean, like, for example, my phone is a Samsung, and it has both Google Play and a Samsung store on it by default. Makes sense for both. The only one I've ever used is Google Play. I don't really buy anything through them. I pretty much, the only thing I download, like, I'll download various apps, mostly for like stores or Bible apps, various other things like that. Just like there's a handful of applications that I have, but mostly it's just like, okay, this is grocery shopping, or this is to do two-factor authentication for getting into VPN at work or what have you, or clocking in and clocking out. But yeah, I just think Epic is being a big baby about this whole thing. And while I do think that some of what the court is ordering is reasonable and is actually probably more of a good thing, I also think that what Epic is asking for with removing the auto blocker for these things by default, instead of saying there's a way to turn this off if you need to, I think that is stupid, and I really hope that Epic loses that aspect of it. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I definitely agree a whole lot with what you said. This is definitely Tim Sweeney being a huge hypocrite, because how do you say that Google is being anti-competitive by not allowing Epic to have its way on Android phones, and yet Tim Sweeney does not want games to be sold outside of the Epic Games Store?
Yep.
And goes out of his way to make those games exclusive to the Epic Games Store. Something that could be considered anti-competitive?
Shock.
Oh my goodness. And also, considering this, he says that Google is a monopoly because it has such a foothold, and also, to a lesser degree, Samsung, in the mobile market. And yet, he goes out of his way to criticize Linux and despises Linux, and only wants something to do with it only with Windows and Microsoft, even though that could be considered the monopoly of the PC environments. And it's also funny because there were several times where he was complaining about something on Windows, and then someone posted a screenshot about like their desktop environment. He said, "Oh wow, that looks really cool. How did you get that to happen?" And then someone said, "This is on Linux." But the point though is the fact that whenever someone tries to actually do something that is, or present something that could be considered, that it encourages competition, whether it's through selling on Steam or supporting Linux, he completely shuts those things down because he only wants a monopoly on his end. He doesn't want to be a part of someone else's monopoly. So it's a huge hypocritical thing for him to say that in that regard. And of course, like I just said, buying up exclusives of, and I always like to bring this up. The fact that after one indie game, the game was called Darkwood. No, not Darkwood. It was oh gosh, I can't remember what it was. But the game, even though the developer of this game, he said he was going to release it on Steam, because that was something that he was promised through a Kickstarter. But then when he went to Epic said that the game could only be brought to the Epic Game Store if it was made a temporary exclusive. And the guy had enough integrity to say, "No, I will not do that because I promised my backers that the game would be on Steam upon launch." And because of that, the game was blacklisted from the Epic Game Store because he would not bow down to Epic's demands. So the fact that Tim Sweeney has the nerve to say all this stuff, but look at look at the skeletons in his closet. It's insanely hypocritical from him to do that. But like you said, there is a silver lining here with the demands that with what has happened with Google, because I agree. I think that I also agree with what you said about the fact that having these auto blockers in place is not necessarily a bad thing. It prevents people from doing something stupid. It protects people who are not knowledgeable, especially if you say you had a kid who said, "Oh, I'm gonna download free Minecraft for my phone," then a whole lot of bad stuff could happen on the phone. But I don't necessarily have a problem with that in practice. The fact that you can disable this is great. I think that's good. And like you said with Apple, it's hard to get a virus or some sort of problem, because Apple does, even though it's a walled garden, it is a wall, and it is hard to bypass that. And I will say though that this is also good because, for all intents and purposes, Google does not really curate its store, and the fact that you have stuff that could possibly even be malware on the sites, on the store, is insane. So having the ability to get apps off outside of the store is great, and definitely I encourage it. I mean, I don't really use the Google Play Store. I primarily just use like F-Droid, or I just like sideload apps from sites and whatnot. But being able to actually, or to give developers the option to expand outside of the Google Play Store is great. Definitely. And I also really like the fact that, with say the Google Play billing not being required, because there is one app that I use on desktop, and I use like my own, like I use a virtual card there. I would have to, if I were to use it on through the Google Play Store, I would have to actually use a Google Play account, and I don't want to put a card, even if it was say a virtual card. I don't want to use the Google Billing Play thing. I really just not care for that. So if having that restriction removed would be great for me, just because I can just directly pay the developer as I see fit and not have to use Google services. And I really hope that this, the fact that certain things like Google Play is incentivized or will be forbidden to be pre-installed onto phones. I'm hoping technically we could also maybe get to the point where the operating system, the bootkits for the phones might also be unlocked for users, because in order to actually de-Google a phone or just to install your own operating system, you either have to buy a Google phone specifically, because those actually are completely unlocked, or you actually have to import an international phone version. Like I had to import a European version of the Samsung S9 just so I could install my own operating system on there, because the US versions are completely blocked off. So I like the things that are coming out of this lawsuit, but at the same time, I completely disagree with Epic's reasoning for this lawsuit to begin with. I think it's ridiculous, considering the claims that not the claims, but the things that they've done does not match what they're saying Google's doing here.
Right.
Or it is matching, but it's just a reflection of what they're doing. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say there.
Yep, all good points. Epic is just absurdly hypocritical on this whole front, and of course, the fact that they're asking Google and Samsung to make their phones less secure is just stupid. Yeah, Tim Sweeney is a big baby. That's all there is to it. He is. So, anyway. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. You know, just a side note, something I forgot to mention earlier, which I'm not gonna like insert it back in, but I forgot to mention that as far as games that I played earlier, we actually did play as a family. I mean, like we've been doing our Mario Party Superstars. We did Mario Party 2 from Nintendo Switch Online, and I actually had, mostly because I wanted an excuse to use my N64 controller. But yeah, anyway, that's just a side note. In terms of news, though, Nintendo has revealed some new hardware. It's an alarm clock called Alarmo. And yeah, so basically it plays music like you would expect, like you can do already with your phone, for an alarm. And like it, depending on how, if you stay in bed longer than you should, then it'll start, like, it'll change things up and maybe make it more intense, or like as you are moving, as you're like rotating and stuff in your bed, because it has a motion sensor, it will like make sound effects from the game it's playing music from or whatever, with the thought that it will help you wake up better, and use other random stuff. And you can, like, I think the themes that they're gonna have, it's there's Pikmin 4, Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and Splatoon 3. I think those are all the ones they have at the moment. No idea what it's going to cost. I don't remember if they set a release date for it. But yeah. At first when they were showing off the way it was like detecting movement and stuff, I thought that it was like, oh, there's a camera in it, and it's like, no, it's just motion sensor, which, I mean, you get that in like regular house lights and things like that as it is. So it doesn't seem to be anything invasive as far as I can tell. It's just a motion sensor. So anyway, what are your thoughts?
I do want to actually quickly mention, the price is $100.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that Nintendo tax, I guess, is...
Yeah.
I wonder how much Harmon Smith is going to be praising this, saying it's revolutionary. All the other companies are just so jealous of Nintendo and their brilliance and their brand recognition. Anyway.
But yeah, I honestly could not believe that this was a thing. At first I thought, is this an app? Because I just saw the thumbnail, I just thought, is this some weird app that Nintendo has, like their own sort of alarm clock app? And then I realized, oh no, this is an actual thing. This is actual hardware. This has nothing to do with gaming at all either. So I was like, I was so confused too, because especially since, as you mentioned, if you want to have the music from the games, you could just get the music from the games, whether you're just getting some MP3 file, or if you're just like trimming something that you've heard before, you can just set that as your ringtone for the alarm and just wake up to that. And I'm thinking, why would I spend $100 on that? And sure, it can change the theme, or could add special sound effects based upon, how if you're still in bed, whether you're tossing and turning, and even when you get up, it plays something different. But I feel, especially for when you actually get up, I feel like the novelty of that is going to wear off probably within a month or so.
Yeah.
And you really won't care at that point. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And $100 for this too.
Yeah.
That's a very steep price for an alarm clock. And I mean, I've never paid. I mean, granted, I haven't bought an alarm clock for years, and primarily just because the one I have still works. But and actually, I don't think I paid for that one. I think that was like a birthday gift too. But that one couldn't have been more than $30, and I would even argue that it was probably maybe $20. I would probably even argue that, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just perplexed as to why this is a thing. Granted, Nintendo charged people for cardboard with the Nintendo Labo.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, that actually had to do with games. And you could actually do something with it.
Yeah.
This is just weird, though. I mean, especially since this is also, I really feel like Nintendo's trolling people because people wanted Switch 2 news and they just dropped this thing out of the blue. I guess this was our wake up call, though, just to say, you're not getting Switch news, wake up. But yeah, this is really just insane. I mean, I guess I will give them credit, though, that new themes and new music will be free. So I guess I will give them credit for not, charging extra, like say $3 for this pack and then $3 for that pack, and maybe depending on the pack, it's maybe $5. So I guess I can give credit for that. But at the end of the day, still though, it's a $100 alarm clock that I feel is very unnecessary, considering the fact that phones can do a lot of the stuff that this thing does.
Yep.
That's all I've got to say.
Yeah, this thing is, I mean, I think some of the functionality is interesting, but it's just pointless. Like, I could see this maybe being something that would help, like, when you have, like, teenagers and that sort of thing, where, they might have a harder time getting up, and so, like, this is ways to motivate them and all this other stuff. But, I mean, for one, I could see, at least for me, what would probably happen is if I had game sound effects, it would just get incorporated into my dreams, most likely. And so then I'd have all this, these game sound effects. The other thing is, of course, I'm married, and so if this stuff's going off and waking up my wife, she would be pissed. I wouldn't do it for my kids because we've gotten them regular alarm clocks, and the novelty wore off very fast. And while this one would probably not wear off quite as fast, especially because it plays like actual music and that sort of thing instead of just ringing, because we just got them like the really basic bell alarm clocks. It's still just like, even if it was like $30, I wouldn't. Like, no, this is ridiculous. And the other thing is, so as I mentioned in the intro, I do roll around a lot. Well, I should say I don't toss and turn so much. I roll over a lot during the night, and not like rolling over, crushing my wife or anything. Just more like I rotate a lot during the night, and I don't think I'll do as much as I used to since I started getting my pillow. But it I still rotate fairly often, and so like the thing with, since it does monitor like your sleep and everything, it probably would think that I was constantly waking up. And really, I mean, there are some nights where I have like that, but most of the time nowadays I don't really have that problem. The other thing is that when it comes to the way I wake up, I mean, I have one alarm. I don't ever snooze it. I have had the same song on my alarm for a long time. Well, let me back up. So there was a time, probably back when we were first married, where my alarm was the Ballad of the Goddess from Skyward Sword. The problem is that would go off and it would make me jump half the time, because it goes like da 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 da, and it was just like really loud, and I mean, it would wake me up, but it also would practically give me a heart attack. I mean, well, But before that, I mean, technically, even after that, I had this alarm clock that I got when I was 12, and I used that thing for like 20 years. And I stopped using the actual alarm on it a long time ago because of the fact that it's just like, brr, 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 unless I did, like music, and the music half the time would not wake me up. But then for a while, I was using one of the, my favorite song from Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is called Theme X, and it's just like gorgeous theme, like easily my favorite song on that whole soundtrack. And like that was a nice way to wake up, because it starts off a little quieter and then gets progressively a little bit louder, and so it's like it was a good thing to wake up to. But then a while ago, I started doing the Colony 9 theme from Xenoblade Chronicles, and that one, like every time I hear that going off, I'm just like, I want to keep listening to this song. It never shocks me awake. Just like it wakes me up, and then flip off my alarm. Flip off. I give it the finger. No, I push the button, swipe up, and then I get out of bed. At most, I might sit there for a couple of minutes, but usually I'll just get up and start doing my morning routine. But yeah, so it's like this Alarmo thing for me is just, it would be completely pointless. Even if I was single, it would still be pointless and way too expensive. Even if it was $30 and I was single, I cannot see myself buying something like this. It's so pointless. And I know that there are people who will buy it. And like for the hardcore Nintendo fans, or, one of the guys I know, I think he said he planned to get it for his son, and his son's like 7, so about the same age as my son, my middle son, and it's like, I'm like, if people want to get it, then by all means, go ahead and get it. If you're willing to spend $100 on this, go ahead and do it. But even if I was not having, any financial issues, I mean, even if I was making a bunch more money, I can't see myself spending money on something like this. At least not at this point. And even if it was, it would only be something I would do for my boys. And even then, only when they're older and it's more of an issue for them to get up in the morning. And we're nowhere near that point yet. Even though it's funny, my middle son, on school days, he always has a difficult time getting up in the morning, and he never wants to get out of bed. He just wants to stay in bed. But then on the weekend, he's up bright and early every weekend, usually earlier than the time that he normally has to wake up for school. And it's like he doesn't even have to go anywhere. Half the time he gets to stay in his pajamas because he's homeschooled. It's like, unless they're going somewhere later in the day, and then they just have to get dressed later in the day. But most of the time, it's like, okay, we start homeschool. I mean, you get breakfast, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, and then after that, start school. And they have like at most 4-ish hours of school, unless they are really dragging in the morning and have to take it past lunchtime. But that rarely happens. And I was never homeschooled, so I never experienced that before, but I've observed it watching my kids because, of course, my wife homeschools them, and she was homeschooled most of the time. So she's used to all that aspect. Anyway. Yeah. This is stupid. I think it's pointless and a waste, and I think it will sell reasonably well. I think it'll sell better than Labo, at least. But I don't think that everybody's dumb for buying it. I just think that it's a novelty that's going to wear off very quickly, and I don't think people should buy it, but they can do whatever they want with their money. So yeah, that's all I got.
Nothing more from me.
All right, so we just got, I should back up real quick and let's say, we have lots of times where we pick on PlayStation because PlayStation's been doing a lot of really stupid things lately. and been very anti-consumer in a lot of areas. But now we have something to make fun of with Microsoft because, well, I wouldn't say this is necessarily entirely anti-consumer. It is stupid. And that is that 343 Studios, which has been responsible for all the Halo games since Halo 4, has renamed their studio to Halo Studios. And they have multiple Halo projects in the works, all of which are going to be in Unreal Engine 5. What are your thoughts?
All right. So first off, why the rebranding? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, I've heard that they have hired new people, but at the same time, I do not feel that warrants any sort of rebranding. I mean, they could say, well, it's to help remove some of the bad tastes that gamers have had, which I feel like isn't completely unwarranted considering the fact that the Master Chief Collection on PC at launch was bad.
Yep.
And it took time for them to fix that, considering the fact that Halo 5 with its story, people weren't too fond of, and considering some of the, I guess, gameplay elements, I guess possibly with the multiplayer primarily, because I think that the people in general enjoyed the campaign, but some of the multiplayer aspects of Infinite people didn't care for, at least at launch, people didn't care for. So there's that there as well. I don't think rebranding your name is going to really do too much, but also I really feel like people know 343. Like, they understand what it's about. And sure, Halo is the name of the series, but why change it from something that people are familiar with and, something that already was Halo related, because the company name was named after 343 Guilty Spark to begin with. So it's not like you had something that was unrelated to Halo and then something that's more related to Halo. It's just one Halo thing to another Halo thing. And I mean, personally, also the logo font doesn't really look all that great to me, but
Yeah.
that's just my personal taste there. So it really doesn't make sense to me. But I feel like the biggest sin here is switching to Unreal Engine 5. Like, this is a very unoptimized engine. It's so demanding, so buggy. Why are you switching over to this? I feel like even if they were having difficulties, I think that the Slipstream engine would have been so much better to use than Unreal Engine 5. I mean, it's going to cause so much problems down the road that I just don't know how to begin. And sure, it looked nice. I guess the demo that they presented, it looks nice, but it's just a demo. It's not actually, for one thing, running on actual hardware that people are going to be using, and the performance is not going to be that great. So I do not think that having these prettier graphics I don't think that's going to balance out the fact that there will be performance issues in the game itself. So I totally disagree with this to begin with. The fact that every game going forward is going to be using UE5 is just a nightmare to me, and I do not look forward to that. But I'm also very skeptical about the future of Halo, just because I can't remember what the exact position title it is, but it's high enough. I don't remember if it's like director. I don't remember if it's like some sort of producer role. I don't remember what it is, but there's someone new who's assuming an authoritative role over Halo, and sure, I could be proven wrong, but based on what I've seen on her and what she's about, it leaves me very skeptical about the direction that future Halo games could take. So I'm just like very skeptical of that. So like, not only on the performance side of things because of Unreal Engine 5, but the story side of things too. I'm just like, oh, this is not it really makes me just say, let's just pull the plug on Halo and just let it die off. That's just how I feel there. But in sum, I'm very skeptical, and I'm not too fond of these changes.
Yeah, so I definitely will have to say, first of all, I'm not even going to get into the person who's involved with Halo now. Like, it's certainly not encouraging that you're making that important at all. And I'm not talking about you personally. I'm saying that that Halo Studios is making that important. I think that that's very disconcerting. But as much as that's something that bothers me, what bothers me more, at least right now, until we get like some real confirmation of what they might be doing in terms of, changing things up to go more with that type of weird modern audience garbage. It's this Unreal Engine 5 stuff. I mean, of course, I definitely don't like the rebranding of the studio. I think that's stupid. It's stupid. It's completely pointless and unnecessary. I mean, if they were going to rename it to Halo Studios, at the very least, they could just use the Halo logo, the already existing logo. Then at least it would look better. But, whatever. I mean, like, in general, I don't think it's a bad logo. I just think that when you have this iconic logo related to this iconic series that has existed for over 20 years, it would make sense to just use that logo. But whatever. Anyway, completely aside from that, it is the fact that they are wanting to do all these games in Unreal Engine 5, which, as you said, is an unoptimized garbage engine at the moment. Now, in the future, hardware will eventually catch up, but by that point, we'll probably be in Unreal Engine 6, and then we'll have another issue with it. It's like, Unreal Engine 5 is just making games run so poorly. I wish that they had just stuck with Unreal Engine 4, because Unreal Engine 4 still, developers push it to make some great looking games. Impressive stuff, and still able to get great performance out of it. Look at Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's a great example. And Rebirth for that matter. Both Unreal Engine 4 games. At least I'm pretty sure Rebirth is still Unreal Engine 4. Incredible looking games. And granted, Rebirth at least has issues on the PS5, the base PS5, because it's just not super powerful. But like Remake, when they brought that over to PS5, they were able to give it a 60 frames per second mode, and it still looks amazing. And Unreal Engine 5 is just a garbage engine, and I think the problem is that they just think, oh, well, the reason why people don't like Halo is because of the visuals, because they're not good enough with this current engine we've been using. And it's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. Yes, of course, you'll have the PlayStation fanboys in particular, zooming in and enhancing on the blurriest portion of one of the textures or whatever, or, you had the whole Craig meme from the original reveal of Halo Infinite. And, like, some of those criticisms were valid, but the reality is that the game, like, Infinite isn't a bad-looking game in general. It's not, like, on the same level necessarily as the ultra-realistic PlayStation games, but it also runs better, and it's just a different type of game. This change is unnecessary. It's detrimental. It's only going to do bad things for the Halo franchise, which, as it stands, I agree with you. I think Halo's just at a point where it probably needs to die. And I will fully disclose, I have not played through any of the Halo games except the very first one. And I enjoy the first one. I have the Master Chief Collection. The only reason that I haven't played through more of the games is really just because of the fact that I wanted to replay Halo 1 before I dive into 2, 3, ODST, and 4. or not. Is it ODST Reach? I can't remember how all the thing is. I still want to play the other Halo games. I just haven't gotten around to it, even though they do run exceedingly well on the Steam Deck. Fantastic. They run beautifully on Steam Deck. But yeah, it's just, this is not going to be beneficial to Halo, and I think that this is a big mistake on their part, trying to do this, trying to make Unreal Engine 5 a focus when it so far has just been terrible for games. It has done nothing positive for the games other than making them look prettier. But even the games that look prettier run way worse. And in some cases, they're not even coming close to having as good of visuals as they could have on Unreal Engine 4, and yet they're only reaching 30 frames per second. And then they're having to use upscalers and everything, and just unbelievably blurry games in order to make it actually able to hit 60 frames per second. And even then, it's not always maintaining 60 frames. I don't understand what Microsoft is doing with this. And I mean, I guess it's not impossible that they could completely turn everything around, even with this modern audience garbage that they're potentially doing with it. But I will say one thing for sure. If they're going to insert the modern garbage into their game, I will definitely never support it. And as it stands right now, the only reason I haven't bought Halo Infinite is really just because of the fact that I still haven't played through all the other Halo games I have. And eventually when I get to a point that I played through all the games I already have, I will probably pick up Infinite. Because I'm only going to be playing the single player anyway. I'm not interested in the multiplayer. So, but I'm not at that point because I still have basically all of the games to play. And I won't even have the option to ever play 5, even if, I mean, like, I only halfway want to, just because I'm a completionist, and not so much because of the fact that, I mean, you know, knowing what they do, at least some of what they do with the story and what they did with Cortana and all that other stuff. But anyway, yeah, that's all I got.
Nothing else from me.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we have one final topic for tonight, and this is just more of like an interesting thing. So over in China, the PlayStation 3 Move controller was used to perform surgery on a pig that was 5,780 miles away. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me back that up. It's not that they were located in China, but actually that the surgeons are in Switzerland, and they performed an endoscopic procedure on a pig in Hong Kong. And they did that with a PlayStation Move, with the help of a PlayStation Move controller. So let's just look at this here. So I'm reading this article from, as much as I loathe to support them, IGN. So the medical feat came about as a collaboration between the Faculty of Medicine at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and ETH Zurich. It involved the use of a PS5 DualSense controller as well as a PlayStation Move controller. It's an operation that allowed the surgeons to successfully operate on the pig with full control despite the 5,780 miles between them. Teleoperated endoscopy offers not only remote surgical training and mentoring, but also immediate diagnostic and surgical care in remote areas, particularly when local expertise is lacking. Department of Surgery at CU Medicine Assistant Professor Dr. Shannon Melissa Chan said in a statement, "A remote expert can even instruct trained nurses to perform the procedures. Millions of patients worldwide will be able to be diagnosed and treated for gastrointestinal cancer in a timely manner as endoscopic technology becomes more accessible." ETH Zurich's Professor Dr. Bradley Nelson adds that the team's research will soon take them to perform a teleendoscopy on a human stomach, though it's unclear if PlayStation tech will still be involved. Nelson says there's potential for the technology to help with endoscopic procedures and in other areas too. The use of video game controllers in the medical realm opens the door for possibilities that could save lives, but it's far from the first time we've seen gaming technology used for off-the-wall purposes. A recent notorious example that comes to mind involves last year's viral OceanGate disaster, and that incident, which involved a submersible controlled by a Logitech F710 wireless gamepad, resulted in the deaths of 5 people traveling to get a closer look at the Titanic. The thing imploded. And the US military has been known to use gaming tech for its own purposes, with one example seeing Xbox controllers used to test laser defense systems in 2014. So, this is a whole lot of craziness. I have my thoughts for sure, but what do you think on this?
It's definitely interesting. The one thing that I sort of want to know is who came up with the idea to do this in the first place. It just seems like such a random thing to do, to say, hey, what if we perform surgery with this PlayStation Move controller? I mean, it's cool that they can get this done, especially considering the fact that you're thousands of miles away. I mean, the fact that was successful is cool. At the same time, would I necessarily want a doctor to perform surgery on me using a PlayStation Move controller? Maybe not. I mean, as stated by the article, I wouldn't necessarily also want to go visit the Titanic, and sure, that wasn't the cause for the implosion, but I wouldn't want to get a device that was being used with a Logitech controller. And I mean, granted, maybe if it was wired, it would have been better, but they had input lag. But I still wouldn't trust having that done one way or the other. Could such, I mean, granted, we technically already had technology that allows us to do that stuff anyway. So why would you want to necessarily use something that could be considered lower grade quality? I mean, considering the fact that you probably have more precise tools and other types of, because I know that VR surgery has been a thing for quite a while. I mean, like, for one thing, like, I can't remember how long it was ago. I believe they used VR to perform surgery on a grape, just like so, like some sort of cut that was on a grape. They used like VR and like robotics to do that. So I don't know why they would try to necessarily use something else that probably wasn't intended to be used. I mean, it definitely wasn't intended to be used in this case scenario. Well, I just don't know why. Granted, I hope they disclose for whoever these human test subjects are. I hope that they know, hey, we're gonna be using a PlayStation controller for your surgery. Oh, wow. I mean, hey, at least, in the case of the military, Xbox controllers, especially if it's a 360, that was considered high quality gaming controller. So, the US military was getting the best bang for its buck right there. But still, at the same time, also, there have been some causes of potential drift with, at least a friend of mine has had drift with his DualSense controllers. So it's the worst time to get drift.
I hadn't even thought of that. Oh my goodness.
Oh man. But yeah, this is definitely overall just a very strange case in this world. But yeah, that's all I gotta say there.
All right, well, I'm going to try to be brief since it is late. I need to finish up here pretty soon, but I do want to say that, like, if you were in a position where it was this or nothing, then I would take this probably. Especially like if it was, life-threatening situation where it's like, if we don't do this, you're going to die. And your choice is either we can attempt this and hopefully save your life, or you could die. It's like, well, okay, go ahead and do it. But otherwise, I would not be comfortable with this. Now, I do think that the Move controllers, like the tracking on those is very impressive. Those things are uncomfortable to hold, though. I tried using them one time because, Infamous 2 supports the Move controllers, and I really wanted to do the motion aiming. I thought that would be really cool. But I tried it. It's just those controllers are so uncomfortable to hold. And it was just like super awkward. Like I was hoping that it would be basically like a better version of the Wii Remote, because that's essentially what it was supposed to be. And in terms of the technology, it was way better. But in terms of the actual comfort of holding it, it was just ridiculous. And I think that the technology there, I could see that potentially being good enough to be able to do something like this, but given the choice between that and any other VR option, especially like the really nice VR controllers, even like for the PSVR 2, that to me would make a little more sense, even though I still would not like that idea, even if you don't have to deal with drift, which of course the idea of dealing with drift with that's a horrifying thought. I mean, at least in the picture, the gal who's holding it, the controller is wired, so at least they're not relying on battery power. But still, it's just like, I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with that. I mean, I think that there will come a point in the future when this is absolutely a normal thing, and this is something that they can do whenever needed. And like when the technology gets there, absolutely, I'm on board. But I still don't like the idea of it in general. I think it's just, especially the potential latency there. It's like, okay, you have the latency, the stick drift, which is, once again, a horrifying thought, having to deal with stick drift while you're trying to perform this. I mean, if they were relying on battery power, that would be really bad, because it's like, the DualSense controller does not have a great battery life. I've heard time and time again from people, even people who are really big PlayStation fans, have said that the DualSense has bad battery life. Most of them have multiple controllers, so they can swap as needed. But, like, I would not be comfortable with something like this, because you gotta deal with that input lag, and just think about what kind of frame rate they're dealing with using this as well, because it's like it's a cinematic 24 frames per second. The surgery is more cinematic this way. Oh my goodness.
Oh no. Oh man.
Like that doctor who doxed his patients, who was a PlayStation fanboy that Alex has shown before. It's like some guy in, I think, India or something, who was a PlayStation fanboy and was doxing his patients on the operating table to talk about PlayStation or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was a ridiculous situation, but I'm just thinking, someone like that would be like, using a DualSense is way better than doing this with my hand, because the DualSense is just so perfect. Anyway. Yeah, this whole thing is crazy. I mean, like, once again, I think that if they can get the technology to catch up well enough, get it working properly, great. Definitely not use. I think it would be very bad to actually use a PlayStation controller ultimately. Like, maybe the Move, if they have it worked out well enough to where they can, then okay. But like the DualSense, especially with that stick drift, with you pointing that out, that is a terrifying thought of how bad that could cause things to go. And I just, ugh. I mean, I wouldn't want that. I mean, of course, it would be worse if they were doing it with the Switch Joy-Cons.
Oh goodness.
Because the drift on the, I mean, it was like, okay, you got the drift on those. Then you also have like if they were trying to use the gyro constantly loses its position. I mean, like, at that point, I would rather that they use a Wii remote than that. And even the Wii remote, I wouldn't feel comfortable with. I mean, I think of those options, excluding the VR thing, because the VR thing I actually think is probably the most interesting one that I would feel most comfortable with because of how advanced those controllers are. Apart from that, the Move is the one I would probably feel most comfortable with, but even then I'm just like, I don't like the idea of this unless it was just a situation where this was the only option and this was the difference between life and death. But anyway, that's all I got. All right, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, recommendations and dissuasions.
Alright, so my recommendation is if you played either Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories or Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories and you liked either version, I recommend that you play the other version. So after playing Chain of or finishing Rechain of Memories, it really made me I enjoyed it, but I also appreciated the things that were in the original game. And there are some things in the new version of the game that I really liked that weren't in the original Game Boy Advance version. So I think that both versions have something that is unique to each version, and I think that people who enjoyed one or the other should play the other version because there is still a good experience either way. So that is my recommendation.
All right, excellent. Yeah, eventually I want to do that. I mean, I would love to actually go back to the Game Boy Advance one, but between the two, I mean, like, it would make more sense for me to do Rechain of Memories since I had that on Steam, and especially because GBA, I only have the basic GBA. I don't have an SP anymore. I mean, I guess I could play it on my DS, but anyway. My recommendation, I'm going to recommend God of War Ragnarok because it is excellent. And people have plenty of valid complaints about it, and if it's not your game, you don't have to play it. You know, that's entirely up to you. But if you enjoy 3D Metroidvanias, especially if you've never played a God of War game before, and you enjoy Metroidvanias, it's very much worth your time. And it might feel slower if you're only doing the story stuff and not doing any of the side content. But if you do the side content, especially the difficult fights, the optional boss fights in both Ragnarok and the previous one in God of War 2018, both of them, the optional boss fights to me are one of the best things about those games because they're challenging and they're just really rewarding. I mean, like, it feels good to get through those. So, but yeah, that's what I got for a recommendation this week.
Nice.
So what is your dissuasion?
My dissuasion is going to be, as it gets cooler, and you might not necessarily notice it, but you still should, do not put off drinking water just because it gets cooler. You still can get dehydrated even if you don't necessarily feel hot, and you don't feel like you're sweating stuff out. You can still get dehydrated. So do not forget to drink water and stay hydrated.
All right, always good. All right, well, my dissuasion is going to be also related to God of War Ragnarok, and that is if you are in a position where you are lower levels than the Berserkers, particularly the teams of Berserkers, the 2-team and the 3-team. Do not try to fight them. Don't waste your time trying to fight them until you level up your gear some. Now, if you're more skilled, then by all means, go for it. There are people who will go through those challenges at level 1, which is, to me, insane. I can't imagine trying to do that. But if you are average in terms of your skill level, go back. Wait to fight them until later after you've leveled up your gear and everything. Don't try to fight the trio team, especially at level 6, because you're going to have a bad time, most likely, unless you just happen to either get absurdly lucky or you just have lots of skill, which I do not. So that's what I got. All right, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Only video I put out this past week was, of course, the Mandragora beta demo gameplay, so played that for a good while just to give some experience, just to show what that's like. I may or may not put it out this week, might be something that takes me a bit longer to do, but I have a sort of comparison video that is actually film related that the idea popped into my mind recently, something I've wanted to do before but it didn't do, so it's come back on my radar. So might be this week, might be later, we'll see.
Sounds good. All right, well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. I've once again just been putting out the clips from the podcast, but I am working on the comparison for Persona 4 Golden, which I've done some progress on. I didn't really talk about it earlier. I think I'm about 20 to 30 minutes into the editing for that so far. It's a very slow process. I'm contemplating changing things up a little bit and maybe like cutting out some of the middle story stuff and then just focusing primarily on the actual like the dungeon portion that I did. But I guess more likely than not, since I've already recorded all the footage, I'll probably just stick with the way I'm already doing things. It's going to be slow and I won't do it like that again in the future. But then I've also separately recorded the footage for Persona 5 Royal, which is going to come out after Persona 4 Golden. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for me to get Persona 4 comparison. I'm expecting probably I will not be done with it this weekend, even though I should have a little more time to work on the video. But I'll just get it out as soon as I can, and hopefully it will end up being worth all the effort, because it is a lot of work. So it takes a long time. But otherwise, you can just expect to continue to see clips from the podcast, different segments of our discussions, and should be good stuff. Separately, I have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's YouTube at NABD Cooking. And this morning, as the time of recording, Wednesday the 9th of October, I put out my recipe for a Japanese curry breakfast burrito, which is so good. So good. And totally worth making. But that's about all I got for that. And then, of course, as far as the podcast goes, if you are listening to the audio-only version comes out every Friday at 12 a.m. Central Time on all major podcast platforms, including Apple, Google, YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Deezer. I already said Deezer. In addition to the audio-only version that comes out at that point, we also have a video version on the YouTube channel at the Orange Box Podcast. There you can see not only our beautiful faces, but you can also leave a comment if you have anything that you need to say to us. We do post gameplay clips typically, as well as trailers and that sort of thing related to the topics we are discussing. But of course, even if you don't want to see our beautiful faces, you can, of course, leave a comment, as I said before. If you have any other feedback for us, whether you want to tell us how much you love us, or you want to tell us to Persona 3 ourselves, or any number of other things, you can, of course, do that stuff through the video version, comment on the video, or you can also contact us by emailing us, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at theorangeboxpod, and we'll get back to you if you reach out to us. And if not, we're just going to keep talking for 2.5 hours every week, because this is how we catch up from week to week. So It's a good time, and we're already over a year into the podcast, and no plans to stop anytime soon. So that's all I got. Last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, live your life at 60 frames per second. Orange Box Podcast, out.